Call to order the Advisory Plan Commission meeting for Monday, July 11th, 2022. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes for the June 27th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Monica, and second by Mr. King. All those in favor of that motion signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So, any special requests for continuances? Any old business from the floor? New business. PC 2022-017, Holly Springs Landscape Lake waiver. Who'll be presenting on that? State your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Tony Pagano. Address is 11555 North Meridian Street, Suite 400 in Carmel. It's for Lennar Homes in Indiana. We're here just seeking a waiver for the street tree requirement from section 10.3.6H. We have, based on the ordinance, we would have 150 trees. We're seeking 40% max waiver, which will allow us to move 60 into the common area. This is due to locations of driveways and utilities. And again, this would be the max, so we were shooting for less if we can, but at most we're looking at 40%. There was a draft landscape plan in your packet that showed the proposed plan, that may change again depending on utilities, but that's pretty much what we're asking for tonight.
So you're asking to move them within, and still have the same amount of trees, but just moving into different areas.
Correct. They'd be put in common areas around the community.
All right. Anybody got questions or comments to that?
Do these are street trees, like for the shading streets?
Correct.
Move to common area?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a comment from staff. This is not for the main road surrounding the subdivision. It is for one of the internal streets in the subdivision.
Okay.
The other street trees were provided.
All right. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, there's been a motion prepared.
Mr. President, regarding PC 2022-017, landscape waiver request for Lennar Homes of Indiana, Holly Springs. I move that the request of Lennar Homes of Indiana Incorporated for a waiver of the requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance, Greenwood Municipal Code, Chapter 10, Article 25, Division 3, Generally Applicable Regulations, Section 10-03-06, Landscaping and Buffering, H, Streetscaping, that specifies planting one tree per 40 linear feet of frontage to permit planting 40% of the required street trees in the common areas around the Holly Springs project per Plan Commission staff direction and review to avoid placement conflicts with driveway and utility locations be approved. That the Plan Commission find that Lennar Homes of Indiana Incorporated has met the criteria set forth by the Greenwood Municipal Code, Section 10-04-03K for the waiver for the reasons set forth in its request for the waiver and as presented.
Second.
By Mr. Shell and second by Monica. All those in favor of that motion signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Next order of business is PCO 22-039 and -040 Arlington Farms parking waivers. Who will be speaking to this, please?
Scott Nana, Air Beach Engineering, 603 North Shore Drive, Jeffersonville, Indiana, 4710. I do have a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
And also speaking here, Dylan Fisher with the Wheatley Group, 5150 Charlestown Road in Albany, Indiana.
Thank you, appreciate it, thanks. So just want to give a quick background. I have a few slides just to kind of run through our request. Again, we are the developers Denton Floyd. I have Jared Talley with Denton Floyd here, Dylan Fisher with the Wheeler Group, and Jacob Bissing with FTV Laws here as well. Just to give you a brief background on the site, down here in the left-hand corner is where we are now in the city. We're the next exit up on County Line Road towards Indy. This is the site superimposed on top of an area. You can see the Latitudes apartment complex to the north. That's actually in Indianapolis. Just to give you a brief background on the site, it's a 20-acre site, 18.78 net acreage actually dedicated right away, 408 units, 17 buildings, 688 parking spaces. We're here for the 3.6% waiver of the total parking spaces. And also staff has worked with us, and we are reducing the size of the parking spaces on some of the spaces from the 10-foot required width to 9 feet. We have about 4.6 acres of green space. This is a color rendering of the site, just to give you a little background. Architectural style of the buildings. The amenity area and clubhouse is a very high-end resort style clubhouse. This is, I'm not going to read this obviously, but this is our waivers and some of our justification from the justification statement. It is worth noting, we ran the latest edition of the ITE, which is the Institute of Transportation Engineers, ITE, 5th edition parking. We ran the numbers based on the bedrooms, and each time we ran that scenario, we do fall below the numbers based on the studies that ITE did in this case. So we felt like that was a major part of our justification. And I'm not going to look at all these, but these are our graphs each time we ran the scenario. Again, just a little bit about the development. You can see that we do have a required multi-use trail on the front. We have internal sidewalks. We have provided future connections to the north, not to the north, to the west, the east, and the south. We have dog wash area, a car wash area, a very nice pool and amenity space. And also we have a dog park. So we feel like we've got a really, this is very, very first class A development. So we really appreciate your consideration tonight for these waivers so we can move forward. Here to answer any questions.
Any questions by the commission, the staff?
I would just like to note that they do have that multi-use trail, which does give them an additional 80 parking space reductions based on our unified development ordinance parking standards. So that does help bring that number down. And then, yeah, staff did work with Floyd. We suggested the 9-foot parking spaces. This was in an effort to get that percent reduction down as small as we could. It used to be a larger number when we had the 10 feet parking spaces. This allowed them to add significantly more parking spaces.
Mr. Walker?
Yeah, so the one graph showed peak parking requires 541. Is that, yeah, in our packet.
Well, I was trying to understand the difference between.
Is that, okay, so that one's a weekday, Monday through Friday, 10 PM to 8 AM for half.
And then the other one was for the weekends.
Yes, sir.
So for the peak one, if you go back to that one, it's 6:38. It looks like you're still gonna have more parking than what you were showing for peak. I was just trying to,
In all scenarios, we had more parking.
because you
than
have
peak.
688.
Yeah.
741 to 688.
Okay, there's your, that one's 688.
That one's 659 and you're,
Yes, we're at 688, yeah. So we were above those in all.
that was the point I was trying to get.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Any other questions, comments? Yes.
I don't think I understand science of calculating parking well enough. I'm concerned anytime we don't meet what we've asked for, but I don't know that I understand that.
Yeah, I could probably speak more to how
Yeah.
IPE generates those graphs. So what they do is the same way they do trip generation. When we talk about trips generated by a site. Engineers literally sit out there for similar land uses, in this case, multifamily mid-rise. They do it for single family homes, for multifamily low-rise, for all types of land uses. They sit out there and observe sites, and if you actually look on that graph on the screen, each one of those plots is a site they observe. Sit out there all day, weekends, weekdays, different hours of the day, count how many cars are in each parking spot. And then what you're looking at is an average. So then they assign typical something that can be compared between all the sites. So in this case, we look at here, the number of bedrooms, I think you also calculated it off of other factors. Number of bedrooms, number of rented units, number of people expected to live in the complex, that sort of thing. And so you compare apples to apples, similar sites. So across the country during, this graph shows weekday between 10 PM and 5 AM, which is generally peak parking times. You know, that's when everyone's home and not at work or eating dinner or something like that. Here's the max amount of, on average, the most amount of parking space you can see for a development of this size and type. Does that clarify any?
Yeah, and maybe I was really leading up to asking you, do you agree with the data that you're being presented?
Yeah, I think the IDE is a very well-used engineering standard.
I support the city's engineer.
So you say there's a person out there counting.
That's how they develop these graphs. Yeah.
Now we've got a retirement job.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm out. Okay, thank you.
My other question was, maybe also addressed to Mr. St. John, are you comfortable with going to 9-foot wide parking spots?
Yes, I am. I don't think that's untypical to see, like non-typical to see. Our standard is 10 foot. In central Indiana here, we see a lot of larger vehicles. So those 10-foot parking spaces allow for more comfortable parking in those 10-foot vehicles. But they're comfortable with 9-foot parking in their development, then 9-foot.
I would add that other municipalities have 9 feet requirements, and there's also our Old Town parking can be reduced to 9 feet. So it's not unheard of to have 9 feet parking spaces.
Okay, I appreciate the technical support.
Any other questions, comments? Yeah.
I'm pretty used to 9 foot. My practice for 20 years, 9 foot wide parking was pretty standard for a lot of communities. And 10 was pretty gracious. 10 was used for big box retail in grocery stores for handling shopping carts, kids, and that kind of thing. So 9 foot's not irregular, in my opinion.
All right, good. Anybody else? There's seeing none, there's a motion.
Yeah, you guys are both making me feel a little more comfortable. Mr. President, regarding to PC 2022-039 and PC 2022-040, waiver for parking space requirement, minimum number of spaces for Denton Floyd Real Estate Group, Arlington Farms Apartments. I move at the request of Heritage Engineering LLC on behalf of Denton Floyd Real Estate Group for a waiver of the requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance, Greenwood Municipal Code, Chapter 10, Article 25, Division 3, Generally Applicable Regulations, Section 10-03-02, Parking and Access, D, Minimum Parking Standards, that specifies a minimum of 1.75 parking spaces per dwelling unit for multifamily building complex use to allow 1.69 parking spaces per dwelling unit, 688 parking spaces instead of 714, a 3.6% reduction for the proposed project because the location and size of the detention ponds, the development dictated by its topography and an existing easement prohibit construction of the required number of surface parking spaces be approved, and that the Plan Commission find that the criteria set forth by Greenwood Municipal Code, Section 10-04-03K for the approval of the waiver has been met for the reasons set forth in the attachment to the waiver, written waiver request, and as presented.
Second.
Michelle, second by Monica. All those in favor of that motion, signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, same. Some motion carries. Second one.
President, regarding PC 2022-039 and PC 2022-040, waiver for parking space requirement dimensions and drive aisles, Denton Floyd Real Estate Group, Arlington Farms Apartments. I move that the request of Heritage Engineering LLC on behalf of Denton Floyd Real Estate Group for a waiver of the requirements of Unified Development Ordinance, Greenwood Municipal Code, Chapter 10, Article 25, Division 3, Generally Applicable Regulations, Section 10-03-02, Parking and Access, E, Parking Space Dimensions and Drive Aisles, that specifies 90-degree angle parking spaces must be a minimum of 10 foot in width to allow a reduction to 9 foot width for the 90-degree angle parking spaces in the proposed project because the location and size of the detention ponds for the development dictated by its topography and an existing easement make it difficult to construct an adequate number of parking spaces to serve the project be approved. And that the Plan Commission find that the criteria set forth by Greenwood Municipal Code, Section 10-04-03K for the approval of the waiver has been met for the reasons set forth in the attachment to the written waiver request and as presented.
Second. Okay.
Motion by Mr. Shell and second by Monica. All those in favor of that motion, signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks. Next order of business. PC 2022-051, Arlington Farms change in commitments. As I understand, this is a public hearing. Typical 15 minutes for the petitioner, 15 for remonstrator, 5 minute call for each. State your name and address for the record, please.
And anyone else who intends to speak,
Oh, yes.
make sure that you stand and or administer the oath. You swear or teach perjury, that's the history of the best knowledge.
Jake Missing with Prosper and Todd on behalf of the petitioner. Address is 400 West Market Street, Louisville, Kentucky, Suite 3200.
Could you restate your name, please?
Yes, Jake Missing, B as in Victor, ISSING.
Thank you.
So we've been working with the planning staff in the same project as what we were previously discussing with parking waivers, with regard to commitments tied to the zoning of the property. So earlier this year, this site and a few adjacent parcels to this property were voluntarily annexed into the city. And with the annexation, there was also initially the zoning designations for those properties coming into the city. So the also an additional approximately 6 acres that's on the corner of Combs Road and County Line Road that's immediately to the west of the 20-acre site. That was also zoned RMC. And then there, on the west side of Combs Road, there is an additional approximately 40 acres that received ag zoning. So essentially, those parcels came in to provide continuity for the RMC parcels to be able to bring them into the city's jurisdictional limits. So as that process came along, the city had asked for some commitments tied to the development standards for the property. And as we went through the process, here, it's a little bit different than an ordinary circumstance in which we would seek a zoning for a property that the developer doesn't already own. You know, they're under contract to purchase the property. They are seeking to solidify their developmental plans and have that set up before they can proceed with their closing. But they're only purchasing those only, have the ability to purchase those RMC properties, and that's where their plans for future development are located, not on the agricultural properties, which provided them continuity to allow them to annex into the city. So with that, we're dealing with several landowners, as well as the interest of the developer here and the interest of the city in developing this corridor out County Line Road. So the initial commitments that were sought by the city weren't as well tailored as we would have liked them to have been for specific parcels relative to the development that was proposed. And, it is also to, I guess, more narrowly apply to those agricultural parcels that aren't part of this development on a go forward. So that's the source of, why we asked the planning commission to reconsider these commitments. We believe what we've been able to work with the planning staff to come to is materially very similar to the initial list of commitments, but a little bit more tailored to the specific needs and nature of each of the parcels and how the development will unfold over a period of time. So I'm not going to spare you going through the particulars of that unless you have some questions about those. I believe that those changes were circulated to you all today, but I'm happy to answer any of those questions.
We'll get to questions after I close the public hearing.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to lay out a little bit of that background.
So is there anybody else to speak for this petition?
Good evening, I'm Tom Vanderloop here at that big law firm, 225 South Emerson, Suite 181 in Greenwood. Been practicing law here in Greenwood for 22 years, and this is a wonderful development. I represent KLC Realty, Robert and Catherine Clem, as well as Christy Macarat. There's several properties that point needs to cross, including 3 property owners that I represent. So I commend them for the scope and the effort they put forth for this development. It will have a tremendous positive impact on the city of Greenwood. It will extend sanitary sewers, water lines, and other easements east of 65 to an area that doesn't currently have it. So all 3 of my clients strongly support the project and concur with the revised commitments that the staff and the city attorney have worked with us commendably on revising. Nobody gets everything they ask for, but they were very good getting a conference call, setting up, and working with us, which is necessary for this project due to the complexity of this project to go forward. And again, I just wanted to commend the developer and the city and relate that 3 property owners along County Line Road, my clients anyway, and there's several other that are west of my client's property that also need to be Casey's as at least one other one. So there's a lot of property involved here. And again, I commend the developer and the city for bringing this project along. Thank you.
Anyone else to speak for this petition? All right, anybody to speak against this petition? Okay. Yes. State your name and address for the record.
My name is Robin Heldman. I reside at 8824 Combs Road on the Indianapolis side. I've been to a couple of hearings in regard to this development and expressed the concerns. My main concern is the intersection of County Line and Combs, which is currently a two-way stop. We are asking to add 514 units to the corner of County Line and Combs. And I do not see in any of the reinstated amended commitments that there is any improvements to that intersection. When I read through the language that was provided to me, and I spoke to Kevin this morning or this afternoon, and he relayed to me that there was updated information that was sent that I didn't have access to, but I have raised some questions and concerns in regard to the stricken language. In particular, the dedicated right-of-way potential improvements to County Line Combs and the intersection of County Line Combs was stricken from the language, and I did not see where that was put in anywhere in the amended language, so that was one of my big concerns. The staff has not provided any additional commitments for the parcels west of Combs Road with AG zoning. Majority of the commitments for the two AG parcels would be generated in the future. When a rezone is pursued to change from AG district, that provides more development opportunities. Just when I was reading through the documents, it was very, very confusing to me, the map that was provided and what parcels they were talking about with AG and the RMC. Kevin kind of got into that a little bit with me today. So I just wanted clarification that the AG properties, which are on the west side of Combs, have not been zoned and are not intended to be zoned until they are proposed to be developed. The two parcels that they're not developing, was for the assisted living, which was on the east side. Am I assuming that as well as not being zoned or discussed in this RMC parcel at this point? I just wanted a little bit of clarification on that. Also, when you went into the section of the RMC parcels, they said there is no access from Combs Road being proposed in the new amended commitments, which I don't think they're asking for an entrance for the public or for the residents. But they also said that they would restrict an access to the public and residents for emergency vehicles. And I was just questioning, how are they restricting that access? What is going to be there to restrict any of that access? On D in that section, what defines multi-use, Kevin explained what that was, which was pedestrian and bicycle. It says it's 10 feet from, I don't know where the 10 feet line is. Is that from the landscaping buffer? Is that from the center line of the road? I was just trying to get clarification on that. Also, I just need to know, like, it says there's a future roundabout proposed for County Line and Combs, which the last meeting it was explained to me that was going to be applied for federal grants, which was, I think, in the time frame of 5 to 7 years. So I'm still a little concerned at it being stated that County Line and Combs intersection is still going to remain just a two-way stop with that additional traffic. That's just a major concern of mine. And then also in F of that section, it says it talks about the listed intersections that will encompass the traffic study. There's a colon and there's no intersections listed. So I was just asking and wanting to know what intersections that traffic study would encompass. And then the other one is the RMC area that's designated on the exhibit. Is that going to be a staged development? Because they're talking about not doing the multi-use until it's been developed. So I was just questioning, how is that stage taking place? And I believe that's all the questions that I have. Thank you.
Anybody else to speak against this? By-minute vote.
Sure, I think, I believe we spoke the first time around when we went through the annexation and zoning stage. So as it presently stands, what again, what we're seeking to do is narrow or more adequately apply what was initially approved as a list of commitments at that first rezoning stage, to apply them with a little more particularity to the individual properties when they are developed in the future. With regard to County Line Road, it's my understanding that the improvements that would need to occur on County Line Road, it's an Indianapolis roadway. So I don't believe that Greenwood necessarily is asserting jurisdiction over that to improve it. I know that we are conducting traffic studies, and
Yeah.
Dylan, I believe, is able to speak more to something.
Dylan Fisher with the Wheatley Group here representing Deadwood as well. Specifically on the Combs Road improvements intersection, they're correct. The intersection is part of the Indianapolis jurisdiction. The coordination with Indianapolis through the development process has stated that they are evaluating that and they put it on the future intersection and roundabout improvement list. But at this point in time, they are not requiring or asking the developer to make those improvements. Indianapolis has accepted responsibility for those. Part of that federal grant, however they find programming, that's going to funding that's going to be up to them. But Indianapolis has already put on the list for future roundabout. You had a question specifically to which parcels were part of the REMC. That is both the assisted living and the multifamily property today, which was rezoned REMC with the original proceeding. So we're not asking for a rezoning change or solicitation for that. The commitment changes in general are set to where it's, as Jacob's indicated, it's kind of contingent upon when development occurs. The development team is only developing the multifamily project right now. And so there are conditions that are specific to the Agresta or the assisted living proposed site that at the time in which they come back for a development plan, secondary site plan review or secondary plat review for the city, they'll have to apply for and comply with the zoning commitments that are put in place. And specifically the Combs Road access, you are correct. They're not providing public access as part of phase 1 in the current project. It's only emergency vehicle access. It'll be gated access with a lockbox that's available to the fire department and emergency responders. And then at the point in time in which phase 2 of the assisted living site is developed and they go through the residential site plan process, they'll have to upgrade that to a full access, public access road that services both the apartments and the assisted living proposed site. We did have a long list. I tried to write it down. I think I've addressed it. If there's any others, though, we'd be happy to address those after the meeting if we need to. That answer. Are there any questions that she presented that you all would like to hear us?
We'll get into that.
Okay.
In just a minute. Anybody else?
Tom Vanderlip, Darren again. The AG parcels, the ag parcels are owned by my clients, Bob and Kathleen Klein and Christy Macron. The zoning will remain the same. So if we ever develop our properties, we have to come back for permission for other development items. That's why the only commitment that applies to those two parcels relates to the dedication of easements to Greenwood.
All right. Any other questions? Any other questions?
No.
Okay. Anybody else? For or against? All right. I think they did a pretty good job of answering her questions. Is there? Let's start with staff. Is there anything you want to add or?
I can add some points of just clarification and what is actually being changed from the original ordinance that we had. Like you said, they're dividing up what development charge of what commitments. So before it was the entire RMC zoning was required when there was development. Now that it's broken up to the roads that they're abutting, when that parcel develops, they'll be in charge of those areas. So we're really trying to split that up as well with the agricultural land. We originally were asking for right of way, but that's gonna come at the time that they rezone to a different use from agriculture. At that time, we ask for commitments from those properties.
That's along Combs Road.
And yeah, that's along Combs as well. We explained the emergency entrance for vehicles. The other thing that we did change, that's kind of one of the major changes, is the sunsetting clause. Just due to the amount of time remaining, the sunset clause was coming up rather quickly, so we have amended that language to sunset in November with the option for staff to extend that sunsetting clause by 1 additional year in writing. If for some reason the development is not quite where it needs to be for them to sign off on these and have everything in place. So those were some of the changes that we had made. I believe that's it from me at this time.
Yeah, I can address a couple questions that came up regarding the traffic impact study and the improvements on County Line Road. The traffic impact study was done by this site, for this site in 2022. It focused specifically on the multifamily housing that is being discussed tonight. It did not include traffic generated by the other RMC parcels, which at this time is being discussed as assisted living. When those parcels come through a development process, I will likely require that traffic impact study be amended, primarily because there'll be an increase in trips by the site, as well as a different access point through Combs Road. When they open up that driveway on Combs Road, distributing traffic differently at that intersection. The traffic impact study that was performed looked at County Line Road and Graham Road, County Line Road and Combs Road, as well as the County Line Road and the Latitude Drive entrances. There's 2 of them along County Line, and then the site entrances and exits along County Line. It did identify a couple of improvements to be done at County Line and Arlington Avenue, as well as at County Line and Combs. All those improvements are proposed along essentially the County Line main line that the city of Greenwood has no jurisdiction over. So I believe those commitments do require that they coordinate improvements along County Line with the city of Indianapolis, and that they provide us in writing what the city of Indianapolis wants them to do along County Line. There's not much the city of Greenwood can do beyond that, other than try to be a good partner and a neighbor to the city of Indianapolis. As Mr. Fisher identified, the city of Indianapolis has identified Combs Road County Line as a future roundabout location, as was discussed at a previous plan commission meeting. Assuming the city of Indianapolis has funding for it, and assuming they pursue federal funding for it this fall, and assuming they're awarded federal funding this fall, the earliest construction would begin on something like that would be in 45 years, which is the timeline discussed this evening. But yep, I'd be happy to answer any questions on that as well too, if there's any others.
Up to the commission. Any questions or comments?
But just one thing that I would like to say, I'm concerned as well as any development along County Line Road because of the impact it's going to cause on the traffic. I think, I'm just thinking a roundabout, all that's not really helping that much. I think that needs to be totally improved. Everybody's been down County Line Road recently. There's a number of places along it. Again, I understand it's not our jurisdiction. I think there needs to be some major improvements. County Line Road roundabouts is really not going to solve the problem, in my opinion. There needs to be, now, I assume this information been submitted at the MPO.
And
The city,
they have that on their agenda.
if Indianapolis would pursue federal funding on that, it would have to go through the MPO, and they'd have to justify it, do an engineering study and all that sort of stuff.
Correct. But, I'm just airing a concern. I'm not saying that this is worthy of denial, but I'm saying that, I would have the same concern if I lived in that
Yes.
area.
Yeah, but I think both the city of Indianapolis, the staff I know there, as well as city of Greenwood, knows long-term that development along this corridor improvements are gonna be needed. And I know my department, the engineering department, is working as best we can with the city of Indianapolis to make such improvements along county line.
If I could add, that was one of the reasons that we were requiring the emergency entrance off of Combs Road. Just because we know county line can get a little busy. We wanted a second means of access that was not on county line for emergency vehicles, with the intent for that to be a full public access when the site that is being discussed as assisted living eventually does develop. Whatever that develops to be, it would be required to put in that additional public road.
I'd work really hard. Combs Road is a 2-lane country road. Is there improvements going on Combs Road?
We are requiring improvements at the entrances to our minimum entrance standards, I'm correct. Intersection tapers and deceleration lanes. There's not much beyond that we can do to require improvements along improving or rebuilding county line road.
Combs Road.
It would either, well, I'm sorry.
Combs would be,
Yes, Combs.
it was Combs.
Combs would go with, I was talking about county line road. Combs would go with the second part of the RFC parcel, the assisted living. And at which point we would require that they construct to our minimum design standards as well as improve Combs Road.
Anyone else?
This is a downzoning from industrial to multifamily residential.
Well, it's already been rezoned.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They're just changing some of the commitments.
I see.
I believe it was R1 zoning in the county.
Because we can't actually rezone it at the same time.
Correct.
Anything else? Motion prepared.
Mr. President, in regards to PC 2022-051, Denton Floyd Real Estate Group commitment modifications, annexation ordinance 22-02, various owners. I move to approve modification of the commitment concerning the use and development of real estate made in connection with the annexation and rezoning of 67.2 acres of land generally located in the area of East County Line Road and North Combs Road by ordinance number 22-02. They're primarily related to the rights of way of the agricultural parcels that clarify details on the development within the residential parcels, and that revise the commitment expiry period as set forth in the staff report and as presented, and authorize and direct the commission president to execute and deliver a memorandum regarding the commitment modification regarding common council ordinance number 22-02 to the common council in the commission's behalf.
Motion by Mr. Shell, second by Mr. Walker. All those in favor of that motion signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Motion.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right. Next item on the agenda is PC 2022-052, 374 North Emerson rezone. This is a public hearing. 15-minute petitioner, 15 remonstrator, 5-minute vote each. So anybody's going to speak for or against this petition needs to stand and be sworn in at this point, at this time.
the best of your knowledge.
All right, before we get started, I might add that be respectful for the people that are speaking for or against and provide enough time. Don't repeat what the previous person might have said so that we can get enough of it heard. Okay, so who's presenting? State your name and address for the record, please.
Ken Koziel, 1051 Greenwood Spring Boulevard.
Go ahead.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present this request on the project. My name is Ken Koziel, representing the Garrett Companies. Tonight, I'd like to briefly introduce the Garrett Companies so that you know who we are and what we do. Our main purpose is to request rezoning of the subject property, so I'll review our justification for the request and why it's right for the city of Greenwood and how it follows exactly the guidance of the comprehensive plan. We also want to make sure that this is good for our neighbors, so I'll specifically discuss each of the previous development concerns that were raised in this regard and how we address them in our plan. Finally, I'll share project information showing our site plan, the building product type, and the images of what we propose. Briefly about the Garrett Companies, we're a fully integrated real estate company. We were founded here in Greenwood in 2014 and remain here with our headquarters. We specialize only in Class A multifamily and mixed-use developments. And to date, we have over 50 projects across 8 states. All of our Indiana projects, however, have been focused right here in our hometown and surrounding our corporate headquarters, which is located right off of Emerson Avenue. 2 years ago, we completed the Verge Luxury Flats on Greenwood Springs Boulevard, and we're currently under construction on another project adjacent to the airport, which will include a new coffee shop and in the early stages of development for a restaurant concept in the city of Greenwood, on the Greenwood side of county line. So we're invested in Greenwood, invested in the area. The site we are discussing tonight is located on Emerson, just about a half mile from our office location. Looking at the aerial map of the corridor along Emerson, you can see the project location of 374 Emerson Avenue. It's approximately 16 acres and sits between the Red Dot Storage and the Maple Grove Residential subdivision. The property is currently zoned IL Industrial Large. We are requesting a rezone from IL Industrial Large to RMC Residential Multifamily Complex. Among several points in support of the request for rezoning, the first I want to review is that this request meets all 5 of the land use goals of development in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan with regard to land use states 3 key concepts and 5 goals and objectives. The first key concept is that we should focus on the eastern side of the city to effectively manage development in areas that are currently undeveloped. And as Greenwood has grown and the Emerson Avenue corridor has expanded, this is one of the last undeveloped properties along the corridor. The second concept is balanced growth, which you'll see we are proposing as part of this project. And the third, fiscally responsible growth related to the boundaries of city infrastructure. Next, the comprehensive plan sets 5 goals for land use, which this request and the proposed project follow very specifically. They are 1, ensure quality managed growth. 2, develop a distinct, attractive, and strong identity. 3, prohibit development within environmentally sensitive areas. 4, provide for the housing needs of Greenwood's present and future residents. And then 5, locate industrial uses in appropriate locations. I would state that these goals can only be achieved more fully by this request and this project than they could with any large industrial development at this location. The request would provide for transitional zoning, a smooth transition in type
and in relative density from one property and zoning to another. The existing zoning of properties along the west side of Emerson has a hard line between residential attached and industrial large today. And the only transition that exists is the fact that this land is vacant. This diagram shows the existing zoning and the transition that our request would allow. If you look at the zone map of the city of Greenwood, in almost every case where there's a residential touching an industrial large property, that residential is an RMC zoning in order to buffer all the less dense residential from large industrial properties. There's only one zoned residential property in the whole city, in fact, that is developed and touches industrial large zoning. It's located on the southernmost edge of the city along 31, and it's a small development which actually also has half RMC zoning. So transitional zoning is just good planning, and it follows the precedent that the city's followed adjacent to all of its large industrial areas. And this brings me to a further discussion on responsible development and growth. I specifically mention this because it's stated as part of the statutory criteria for considering a rezoning request. This request and the proposed development is responsible because it provides for Greenwood's housing needs, present and future. The development that we propose is a variation in type, size, location, and quality compared to all of the existing housing in Greenwood to meet the community's needs exactly as stated verbatim in the detail of goal number 4 of the comprehensive plan's objectives. The site is also located in the life sciences employment area and the airport transition area. The comprehensive plan dictates that this should consist of less intensive uses in low-rise buildings, and that intensity is controlled by deeper setbacks and height restrictions. Responsible development and growth at this location would lend more towards the RMC zoning that we're requesting and the buildings we're proposing than the alternatives that would be available to a landowner under large industrial zoning. In addition, we plan to develop the site fully coordinated with the requirements of the airport, as evidenced by the location and style of stormwater detention, the setbacks from the airport, and the height of the buildings, which I'll show you in our site plan. We have also responsibly addressed concerns of height, density, and privacy for neighbors. We've done this with deeper setbacks from the residential neighborhood, placement and direction of parking, height of the buildings, orientation of buildings, limits on surface parking, and the use of landscape buffers. Regarding responsible growth, again, this natural transition of density between residential and large industrial uses follows the established norms of good planning and the precedents of the city. Finally, I don't want to leave out a very important part of the plan to some people. We have addressed and improved upon all of the concerns raised through the property's previous rezoning efforts. I've read all the minutes from the previous meetings on the property and previous hearings and I've seen those proposed plans. As a result, I've made certain that the plan we propose is one that incorporates every one of those concerns. I'd like to cover those briefly. The first concern addressed was with the number of units previously proposed. You saw a request for 350 units previously, and we are proposing 236. So that's a 1/3 reduction. At the time of the previous rezone request, there were some concerns raised for traffic, which at the time were unknown. Since then, a traffic study was completed for the intersections on Emerson Avenue between Main Street and County Line Road for the impact of developing 350 units on this site. That study concluded that, quote, the proposed multifamily development will not cause the need for any improvements at any of the studied intersections. There were concerns raised about building height, and I would fully agree too that 4-story residential buildings at this location would not be in keeping with the immediate surroundings of the area. We are proposing and will commit to buildings that are no more than 2 stories. That will match the adjacent residential areas and will honor the guidance of the goals set forth in the comprehensive plan. There was also a specific comment about density, where the previous proposal you saw had 22 units per acre. We are proposing 15 units per acre, which again is 1/3 less dense. And just for one comparison, this is half of the density that the Verge multifamily project has at 30 units per acre. This is our proposed site plan, and I'd like to review some of the details to show how it fits well on this property. Emerson Avenue is on the right, and our entrance is aligned with the one across the street. There's 236 units in 2-story buildings on this site. Most of the buildings have 10 units per building, and those 10-unit buildings have attached and direct access garages to each of the units. So with this feature, and you'll see from the photos, it's a product type that really looks, feels, and lives like single-family living. The buildings are 35 feet in height. The clubhouse and leasing building is only 1 story. We have a pool and amenity space, a dog park with areas of open space, and extended setbacks on the west and the south property lines. These are some photos of the same building product at other sites. The colors and placement of materials is still to be determined, but the types of materials, which are mostly masonry and hardy plank siding, would be similar to these images. These are just a couple drawings of the main elevations of the buildings. The top one shows the garage elevation, which would be interior to the site, while the bottom elevation is what will be seen from Emerson Avenue and from the adjacent properties north and south. This is the same, but an actual photo of a completed building. So again, this is the elevation of the 2-story building that we would see from Emerson and from the perimeter property. To summarize, the Garrett Company is a Greenwood resident, as am I. I work in Greenwood, but I've also lived here for 20 years. So our interest in the growth of the city is not just from a business perspective, but as citizens too. Our request and the proposed plan is responsible growth and development for Greenwood. Housing is needed in Greenwood, and this Class A development improves the quality of life in the city. We've listened to the concerns raised previously, and we've incorporated them into our plan. And with that, I thank you for your attention and look forward to your discussion.
Anybody else to speak for this? All right, seeing none. The spokesperson for remonstrators. Would like to start? Anyone? State your name and address for the record.
Randy Gooden, 1157 Central Park Boulevard, South Greenwood, Indiana, 46143. Overall, the plan looks really nice. There was a couple of concerns. I'm just trying to get clarity, so when I post about this, I have it correct. I understand they have the space of 45 feet off the build line, the property line, I should say. There is still a concern when I look at this, though. I don't have this drawing up there, but if you were to look at unit 14 and where it sets to the south and west, the very last house, before you actually hit the real part of the cul-de-sac on Maple Road Drive, from the image, it looks like it's only 50 feet roughly from that home. And I know that they're trying to address the noise with their density of plantings. But I was going to ask if they would have you consider using berming, which we know they use in industrial areas, to try and reduce the noise, and then do the dense planting on top of that, so that they can again create a barrier between themselves and their neighbors without causing too much disturbance. It's also one of the things that when I look at this, I have a concern about noise, and that is dumpster location. I know that they list a trash compactor on here, but I don't know if that is intended to be used for the entire unit. And if it is so, how are they going to control the trash from units on the very far west end of this property, getting it from there up to that trash compactor? And the reason I raise that is if you have when the trash service is coming into a community at 6 AM to empty these things, it's a disturbance to the neighbors. I know we tolerated it and we had it changed by us, and I just wanted to address before they move forward with that, and that's all I have, thank you.
State your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Sandra Beheimer, and I live at 972 Maple Grove Drive, Greenwood, Indiana. And I've been a homeowner on Maple Grove Drive since 2001. And I do want to thank you for hearing me out. I don't have a lot of big words to say to you, but I am a homeowner on that street in that neighborhood. I moved from the east side of Indianapolis down to Southport. I lived in an apartment for 17 years. And I was so sick of looking at apartments that I decided it was time for me to find a little home. So when I started looking, I found two different places. And one of them was Maple Grove, another was over in another area. I got exactly what I wanted in my home. And it's been a joy to live in this neighborhood. I wanted to move by the airport because I'm an airplane buff. And the people that owned the home, I knew, which I didn't know until I stopped to look at the home. And they told me about the neighborhood, that it was good people, quiet neighborhood, hardly ever any mischief going on. That sounded really good. I wanted a home with a front porch, and I wanted a home with a deck and a fenced-in backyard. I got that. Everything in that home was so satisfying that I was very happy to be able to purchase that home. The neighborhood has been a great place to live. Good neighbors. It's quiet. We never have that I know of any crime in that neighborhood. I do have to disagree with the young man that talked about the traffic. Since they've been put the dividers on Emerson, the traffic has been, to me, it has been worse. I'm retired now, but when I worked, which is, I've only retired since 2020, but the traffic has increased on Emerson. And I have said at the end of our drive to go left, which is north, sometimes 15 or 20 minutes. So I would say that the traffic has not gotten any better, and I think it will get worse. And I do understand that people want to have a home to live in. I do not want to move my home, but I do not want to look out my back door and see apartments again. And I know I'm just one person, but I love my home. But living in Greenwood, and I know I can't say a lot for anybody else, but it is a wonderful neighborhood, and I know whatever is going to happen is going to be, I know what you look at best for Greenwood, but please look at our neighborhood as to what we would like to have too. That open space. I've seen 2 snakes in my backyard. And I can handle that. But looking at apartments for the rest of my life, and I may not have many more years, but I want to enjoy it. And so I would thank you to consider your decision. Thank you so very much.
My name is Dwight Howard, and I live at 318 North Emerson Avenue. And Labor Day in September will be my 60th anniversary. As far as I have called 318 North Emerson Avenue home for 6 decades. I want to start out because we always like to point out the bad things. I would like to compliment the proposal as far as they're using a third of the less apartments. They're not 4 stories, and the density has been reduced. But the density, as I pointed out before, is still 5 times the 68 acres to the south of the property. The property by my house, behind my house, and the next addition, we are still 5 times, their density level is going to be 5 times what that is. Another issue that bothers me is the 45 feet from the property line. I mean, you know, come on. At least the other proposal, they kept the buildings away from the property line. I mean, I don't want the buildings right there sitting on top of my house. And I think that is a major concern. But as I presented with the density study, I've also done another density study. The distance between County Line Road and Main Street is approximately 1.9 miles. Okay, now, could anyone tell me how many businesses exist today in that 1.9 miles? Well, since I grew up on the land, I've walked it many times, I did it. And I've got all the receipts with me tonight. But there are 166 businesses in that 1.9 miles that feed into Emerson Avenue. Like the lady before me was talking about the traffic. When are we going to determine this is a very severe public safety issue? If you grant the proposal that they're proposing of 236 units, one company with the bird of 180, the hangar is going to have 218 units, and the proposed 236 units. You are committing a total of 634 vehicles to Emerson Avenue daily, because their only way in and their only way out is Emerson Avenue. There's no escape route. Okay, then if they have 2 cars, you're looking at 1,268 vehicles committed to Emerson Avenue. When is enough enough? And like the lady said, when they put the concrete divider down the road to do away with so-called dangerous suicide lane, that really screwed things up. The people who live behind me, like she said, they can't get out of their property. They have to turn right and make a U-turn. And the city of Greenwood really was special to me because they took away my right to turn north out of my property. And if I'm coming from the south, I can't turn into my property because there's a concrete divider. So I am forced into making U-turns. But I mean, we've accepted that, and that's what we have to do. But out of the 166 businesses that feed into Emerson Avenue, there's a total of 68 what I call direct feeds in one ways. I labeled the businesses one way and 2 ways. It broke my heart, but I'm not going to be deceptive. I had to list Sam's Club as a 2-way because if you know the area, you can go to Main Street. But I sit down there on a couple Saturdays for about 3 hours, and it works out about 75% of all the vehicles that go in there use Emerson Avenue. But to do it right, that's a 2-way. But there are 68 businesses that feed direct. There's no escape route. On the south end, you've got the complexes down there that they can use Main Street as an exit. On the north end, you've got the Sonic and all them up in there, and that complex, they could go out on County Line Road. But I guarantee you they go out on Jefferson Avenue because they're not going to go out on County Line Road. But this is a major issue, and that's why the last time I was begging for a traffic study. Now, the traffic study that was done was not a traffic study. A true traffic study is when we put the cords across the road and it registers the vehicles going up and down. I would love to see you all delay this and let's do a traffic study. Let's see if Emerson Avenue can handle this. Okay, why create a storm that doesn't need to be created? It's bad enough the way it is right now. But all we're doing is adding more fuel to the fire and making it a lot more dangerous for the people who live behind me and myself getting out on the road. And I sure as don't want to leave my blood on Emerson Avenue. I love it. I've lived there for 6 decades. And I sure don't want to see our neighborhood destroyed. And that's exactly what this project, we were against the apartments before, we're against them now. Why can't we build just simple houses like they were behind my house in there? Well, I'll tell you what, because the lady who owns the property has sit on that property for 36 years and done absolutely nothing. And now wants millions and millions of dollars. When there becomes a point in time we tell somebody, maybe you're asking a little too much. That's why we get these kind of proposals. They have to put all these buildings in there to make it profitable. I understand that, but why? At our expense, my neighbors behind me, the people to the south. I wish, I just hope that you will just study this and please give consideration to the people. People behind me have lived there for 30 years, 40 years. I've got 60 years. And I'm going to live there until I die. Thank you.
We have about 3 minutes.
My name is Tim Fox, I live at 974 Grove Drive. I've been there approximately 21 years. I know the city has to grow and things have to change. But I think what you're hearing from all of us here that live in the area, we would much prefer single family homes that offer a lot less traffic, a lot more quiet, and a lot more of what we have in our neighborhood. I know we talked about getting in and out of there. Unless you live there, you don't know how hard it is to get in and out. There are many times I have to go south before I can go north, or I take a risk of being in an accident, and it gets frustrating. With all the building coming south from county line, it's only going to get worse, and the building's not going to stop. There's too much land there to build on. So I'd ask you to consider, what this project, how it's going to affect all of us south, because it is a big deal. Thank you.
We have about 2 minutes. Anyone else? Five-minute rebuttal. Go ahead.
I'm Lee Money. My office is at 310 West Main Street, Greenwood, Indiana. I practiced law here in Greenwood for Johnson County for 40 years. I represent Dolores Montgomery, who is an owner of that property, one of the owners of the property. Dolores is widowed. Her husband, Robert Montgomery, and partners owned that property for years. For various reasons, it wasn't developed. It's important to note that that property has always been industrial zone. And the owners did not develop industrial on that property next door to that neighborhood. It's just important to keep in mind historically where this property, how it could have been developed, and how it's now being proposed to be developed. The substantial improvement that the multifamily will have over industrial development in that area. So it's important to keep that historically. I'm also maybe a little bit uniquely capable of addressing the Emerson Avenue traffic. I happen to be president of the Greenwood Redevelopment Commission when we did Emerson Avenue. And Emerson Avenue was designed and planned specifically to handle even much more traffic than it has now. It was always planned that large businesses would be developed along there. It was always planned that it would handle
even more additional traffic, there's still a significant amount of development to go on along Emerson Avenue. And it was designed, its intersections were designed, quite frankly, originally the center turn lane was designed to handle that traffic. It was designed to do that, it was planned to do that. And the addition of these units for homes does not overburden Emerson Avenue as it was originally planned. It is always difficult to see growth that changes a neighborhood. But this is a high quality, well considered development that it fits every single criteria Greenwood has set forth. And I appreciate Mr. Howard doesn't want anything other than single family. It is entirely impractical single family into and next to the adjacent industrial development that's actually to the north on all those properties. And they're currently industrial or light industrial. And it makes absolutely no sense. And this plan, as noted earlier, is a transitional plan between the single family residences and the industrial development, and maybe even higher commercial traffic development along Emerson Avenue. It is exactly the kind of development to transition between the two. And again, there was comments about people waiting on development. I will tell you, Ms. Montgomery, as now widowed, has not waited for development in this. She's looking for retirement. She's looking for her future. And there are people involved in this too. And I think it's a little bit short-sighted to suggest someone's looking to profit millions and millions of dollars on this when they're quite frankly just trying to move forward in their lives. Thank you.
Oh,
Briefly address a couple items. There was a question about trash. If I can find, well, the trash compactor location is in the northeast part of the site, so it's as far away from any of the adjacent residential as we can get it. And that was done purposely. We are also looking at how we can buffer, how we can landscape and provide a separation and a privacy between adjacent properties, although they're both residential. The previous site plan of the rezone proposal that came in front of commission did have a bigger setback of the buildings, but that's because they put all kinds of surface parking between the buildings and the properties to the south. So what we did with our site plan is we eliminated all of that surface parking because most of these buildings have attached garages like a single family product. And we got rid of all of those headlights shining to the south so that we can maintain that privacy. As far as density, I can't compete with 0 units per acre that exists today. I don't know that that the existing south of us is 5 times less than what we're proposing. We're at 15 units per acre. I don't think that everything south of us is 3 units per acre, but certainly it's a different product and it's a different density. But we're doing everything that we can and we'll continue to with our site plan to provide the best configuration of buildings, landscape buffers, and separation. Thank you.
all right, it's 5 minutes to go for the remonstrators. Anybody? Close the public hearing. All right. So I open up to questions and comments by the commission.
I just have one, maybe I missed it, but what is the proposed buffer between this development and established neighborhood?
Yes, they've agreed to do a large buffer as a 40-foot buffer, although in their concept plans, it's actually larger than a 40-foot buffer. It varies a little bit along the property line, but you see about 45 in some of these areas. They're only required addressed previous concerns from the last petition about the proximity. So they've given a generous buffer on that south side. And along with that, I did add a commitment to limit them to 2 stories. This was something that they had done on their own. But that was a commitment that I agreed with them on, and I just decided to put it down in writing. That was also a concern that was brought up the last time they were here.
Is there mounting in that 40 feet?
We did not discuss mounding.
That was another question. What is the buffer? What does it consist?
Yeah. So it is in the commitments. We do have the large 40-foot buffer yard. It does require canopy and evergreen trees, 5 per 100 feet, ornamental trees, 4 per 100 feet, and shrubs, 20 per 100 feet.
Now, I've seen this done in other places, and what I do have noticed also over a short period of time, some of those might die. Would they be responsible for replacing them if they die?
Yes, they would be held to their landscaping requirements.
On the trash piece, I think it's just a point of clarification that you said it was in the northeast corner, it's item number 6. Is that right? Okay, so it's indicated in the site plan.
Anyone else? Just had one comment. My son actually had one of the homes on Silver Lake Court. He was in the building. Somebody mentioned about the one building. I think it was Mr. Goodman's closest. He owned half of that building from 2006 to 2020. 14 years lived there. So I spent quite a bit of time in the backyard with my grandkids over there. And when I picture from the back fence, another 40 feet, with the distance of the yards along in the Silver Lake subdivision are nice yards. When I see another 45 feet, I feel comfortable with that. I understand I don't live there, but when I look at that, I look at what the facade looks like on the adjacent side of this property. I feel like we've come up with a huge improvement in what has been offered previously.
And if I may, Trent, staff was favorable of this petition. We agree that it is a transitional use. You want to step down your zoning from industrial large. Currently, a industrial large manufacturing building could go in the site with no zoning approvals. They just need to have a plat and a site plan. And I do not believe that there have been single-family offers in the site. If there were, though, we would likely not support that rezone. We typically don't want to see single-family next to industrial large. So this is a zone that does make sense, and they don't look like your typical apartments. Although I do live in an apartment, so I will try not to talk too much on that. But
Right. Any other questions?
Just no way those people can have a stoplight or something that will help them get in and out of their addition. Is that just, I don't even know how they would go about seeking that.
Yeah,
I mean, I know that's really close to Main Street. I just don't imagine, I just can't imagine.
So there are minimum traffic volume thresholds that need to be met before a traffic signal would be installed. I don't know that they are for that development in and of itself, but there would be no traffic
to come out of dropping my dog off and can't have trouble getting out. So I can imagine.
Anyone else? Seeing none?
Will remind you of the criteria to which you are to pay reasonable regard in making your recommendation to the common council on this zoning proposal. 1, the comprehensive plan. 2, current conditions and the character of the current structures and uses in each of the districts. 3, the most desirable use for which the land in each district is adapted. 4, the conservation of property values throughout the jurisdiction of Greenwood. And 5, responsible development and growth.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. President, in regard to PC 2022-052 Garrett Companies, Loris Montgomery, estate of Arthur Summerall property, 16 acres at 374 North Emerson Avenue, the rezone IL to RMC. I move that the petition for a zone map change to rezone approximately 16 acres of land located at 374 North Emerson Avenue within the city of Greenwood, Johnson County, Indiana, from IL industrial large format zone use to RMC residential multi-unit complex zone use as set forth therein, receive a favorable recommendation from this commission to the Greenwood Common Council, and the same be certified to the Greenwood Common Council in the form presented.
Second, what are the commitments that you are putting on it?
That was the clause.
There's
I believe 10.
Sub 10.
10
With subparagraphs.
with some.
With the commitments as recommended by staff. Is that sufficient?
You could say it's recommended by staff in the staff report.
In the staff report, the hearing date was July 11th.
Okay, we have a motion. Motion by Mr. Shell, second by Monica. All those in favor of that motion signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 9-0. All right. Good luck. All right, any new business from the floor? None. Announcements?
What do we look like for the next meeting?
No announcements right now. Currently, there's nothing that I'm aware of on the next meeting. We'll still a possibility there could be some waivers or something that does not require a public hearing and notice. But right now, we're looking for either no agenda or a late agenda.
I'm traveling from the 8th to the 23rd of August. So I may be able to call in for the first meeting in August, but the second one I will be.
First meeting in August will be the. All right. Any other comments, questions? All right.
Sure.
Meeting adjourned.